is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He was rather disappointed to find out that Mörk Borg was not the special of the day at the Swedish chef's restaurant, Stu Horvath.
I love the Muppets.
Who doesn't love the Muppets?
Muppets are great. You can't dislike the Muppets.
Especially like Muppet feet. That's like one of my favorite things in the world. When I see the little Muppet feet running, like either pedaling on a bike or like running down a street, it gives me smiles for miles. Stu, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Now I'm thinking about Muppets even better.
I know, right? So, Stu, we are talking about Mörk Borg today.
Mörk Borg. I have to apologize in advance because this is really the first time that I've ever spoken the words Mörk Borg, and in my head I read it as Mörk Borg.
Me too.
So if I slip, that's why. And, you know, I can't apologize for it every time. So I'm just apologizing for it once up front.
And I don't have to apologize because I said it wrong at least 3 times in the intro, and I've edited that shit right out. So, Stu, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Mörk Borg?
So, man, like, I totally forgot about this game. Not, like, because it's forgettable. It's very much not. It's just, like, I have so many. And I was reminded of it, and I pulled it off the shelf, and I was just like, man, how did we not do an episode on this one? It's, like, right up my alley. It's gorgeous. It's all bright colors and dark shadows and metal and upside-down crosses and horrible things.
And umlauts?
And umlauts, yeah, like, you know, it's the full package, Hambone.
It really is.
Like, it's one of those things where I'm just like, what are we doing? How have we gone for so long? We're supposed to be professionals, man.
I know. I want to read to our listeners real quick the description of the game on the Mörk Borg website. A doom metal album of a game. A spiked flail to the face. Lights on rules, heavy everything else. 4 Ennies. This system has not 2, not 3, but 4 Ennies. Holy crap. This is the real deal. And there's umlauts.
It is absolutely a gorgeous book. Johan Nohr, I hope I pronounced that right, Nohr, just did a fantastic job, not only with his art, but sort of using old art and kind of changing it to make it creepy and metal, and then just loading this thing. It's like a graphic design nightmare, and I mean that in like the best possible way. It's just bold and in your face, like bright colors. Like, you don't think of bright yellow and hot pink as like black metal colors, right? But Mörk Borg kind of makes that work in a way that's really surprising and refreshing, because a lot of the aesthetic is really drawn directly out of doom metal and black metal, and there's sort of like a dourness to that verges on parody in the music scene. You know, like a good black metal band, when you hear it, because like you don't immediately go, well, this is corny, you know, like,
right?
Because their corpse paint works. Like, corpse paint baseline is corny, but like I like Tribulation, and like they make it work in a way that like sort of acknowledges the camp of it, but also is still sort of badass. Like, there's all these weird lines to tread, and I feel like Mörk Borg does the same thing and kind of handles it by being like so over the top and so kind of like incorporating Dayglow in like a weird way that like makes it work and makes it darker for all of its brightness.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, especially about the corpse paint thing, because King Diamond still scares the shit out of me.
Right? Yeah, and he has a mustache on underneath it.
Yeah, that is some real like Cesar Romero type.
Cesar Romero.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. Not shaving my mustache. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, Mörk Borg is everything that when I imagine what heavy metal in RPGs should be, sandwiched together to form the perfect, like, crust cut off PB&J sandwich. Like, it does walk that line very, very well, like a tightrope, elegantly, in like, yes, this is bright yellow and this is neon pink, but at the same time, like, this is some really ghoulish looking artwork. Like, you are walking on sunshine in a Dayglow Necronomicon when you're reading Mörk Borg.
Yeah, and like there's definitely a sense of humor at play in a lot of this stuff. And that sense of humor is both comforting and discomforting. But like then there's one page towards the back that is flat black, and then it has mirrored ink of an upside down cross. And like there's still something about seeing that makes me feel like it's a little dangerous, and it taps into that satanic panic thing. And the same reason like people like Slayer or Ghost or whatever, the satanic trappings are always going to be sexy and scary at the same time, and like it hits those notes. And the whole world of the game is so good because the world is ending. These two-headed basilisks, they're whispering prophecies. The end is imminent, and the whole idea of the game is, what are you going to do? You know the end is coming, and it's coming soon. Like, there's actually a countdown in the book. It's a mechanic of the game about how, as your characters progress in power, the world is soon to end. So the idea is, what are you doing in the last days? Are you trying to stop it? Are you robbing graves? What are you doing? I feel like that's an interesting kind of play on what we expect out of something like D&D, because D&D, I hate to say this, but D&D is a game about grave robbing.
It really is, dude.
You're going into tombs and you're stealing stuff. And I like the fact that Mörk Borg doesn't pull that punch. It's just like, are you just doing this to self-enrich? Are you plundering tombs? Or are you trying to do something even though you know it's doomed to fail? Which is a weirdly hopeful thing, I think, for a role-playing game as grim and murky as Mörk Borg. Mörk Borg, it's Swedish for dark fort, which I think is also extremely ominous, short word name for something.
Yeah, I mean, it is oddly optimistic when you think about it. And it's oddly optimistic in that very, like, early original trilogy Star Wars kind of way. Like, there's no way in hell this should actually work, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I love that there is that option. It's like, well, what do you want to do? It's not like, well, we met in a pub, and now we got to go, like, rob some graves and, like, find this MacGuffin and, like, you know, get on this power fantasy because we're on a clock here. This is like, what do you want to do? And, like, what would you do if the world was ending and there really, realistically, was no way for you to stop it? Like, it feels good to play a game like that. It feels good to have that kind of option and that kind of energy. And the more we talk about this and the more we describe what is happening in this game, like, my little heavy metal heart is happy because they do walk that line so well. And the little aspects and bits of humor in it really kind of, while you have the dangerousness of, like, you know, the Satanism kind of dancing in the shadows, and you have, like, the really kind of gory looking artwork, and then you have, like, all this day glow stuff, there is that little bit of humor and levity that kind of all ties it together with a beautiful ribbon, and it really does let you kind of remember it's a game and you're having fun, and it's high stakes, but at the same time you could be having high times.
Well, and it's just like Call of Cthulhu. Like, you sure can try to stop the end of the world or do something good before it ends, right? But it's not going to end well for you. The game is structured to destroy you, and every bit of power that you get corrodes you, and it's going to end poorly. But, like, the fact that it's going to end poorly doesn't mean that you have to, like, go up to the end poorly, and I think that's interesting. But at the same time, like, we were just recently talking off the record about my Call of Cthulhu game, and how, like, we lost our first player character this past week.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. And that ramped up the dramatic tension. And, like, people were genuinely scared, I think, in that scenario. Like, they were worried about their own personal safety. And there was a palpable tension. But that game session was also a laugh riot. And ahead of that game, I had told people, I was like, there's a pretty good chance somebody's going to die tonight. And going into that, one of the players was just like, even so, like, this has, like, been my favorite weekly sitcom. Like, my Call of Cthulhu game is their favorite sitcom. And there's always going to be, like, that levity at the table that kind of balances out the heavy of whatever game you're playing. And I think that there's something similar going on in Mörk Borg. There's the darkness and, like, the punishment of, like, existence. And then there's, you know, laughing about it at the end. One of the things that is great is that once your campaign is done, they tell you to burn the book. Which is so metal.
I love that so much.
And of course they want you to burn the book because they want you to buy another book. But I wouldn't want to burn this book because there's so much ink and, like, specialized ink. Like, it would probably burn a really cool color and then immediately give me cancer, which I guess is also metal. But just sort of testament to how, like, again, using the word, but not, like, as a pejorative at all, like, how over-designed this book is. Like, there's still so much to find in a relatively small book. I pulled it off the shelf, and I'm coming in the house from the clubhouse, and I'm looking at the spine of the book, and I'm just like, what is that? So, yeah, it says Mörk Borg on there in really big Gothic letters, black on yellow. But then there's, like, some spot varnish on there, and I'm just like, what is that? I can't quite read that. And I'm just like, holy shit, is that glow-in-the-dark ink on there? And I walked into the closet, and sure enough, there's glow-in-the-dark ink on the spine that directs you to Psalm 7. Just for good measure, there's a glow-in-the-dark upside-down cross at the bottom. And I'm just like, man, even after a year, still still more mysteries to unearth in Mörk Borg.
I mean, I could not want for more and better detail and the meticulous thought that goes into something like that. Psalm 7 is, Lord my God, I take refuge in you, save and deliver me from all who pursue me, or they will tear me apart like a lion and rip me to pieces with no one to rescue me. I mean, whoa.
Yeah, that's a pretty metal passage.
Yeah, you can see why they won 4 Ennies, everybody, because this book rules ass.
The system's super light, too. No barrier to entry in terms of, like, mechanics. If you've played D&D, you know, you're going to be able to pick this up in, like, no time. All of the systems are really dialed back so that you really can focus on the horror of the world. It's really high-tuned for, like, mayhem. Like, you're very fragile, and, like, limbs are going to fly off, and, like, heads are going to explode, and it's pretty gnarly. If you've watched Scanners and, like, laughed at, like, the guy's head exploding, you're going to like Mörk Borg. If you think that that's a horrible thing that nobody should ever watch, you're probably not going to like Mörk Borg.
But it'd be cooler if you did.
Yeah, exactly. Also, one of the beautiful things about it is that it has so many random tables, and the random tables are dark as fuck, and I love it.
Ugh, I love it.
But, like, I'm such a sucker for random tables that are just color details, like trinkets and stuff. Like, that's one of the best things Mothership does. Mörk Borg takes it in a similar direction. All of the support for this game has been super cool and gnarly so far. Ferritory has a bunch of great stuff. It's on the same design tip, and, like, so much of the aesthetic is, like, just right on. And then there's been a couple pamphlet games and Night Yeast zines, which I guess aren't really directly affiliated with Mörk Borg, but they have some Mörk Borg material. So all of this stuff is zine and worth checking out if you can track it down. It all looks real nice, high design quality. I really appreciate this stuff. I really appreciate the brightness. Can't underscore that enough. The most boring, grim and gritty crap out there is shades of gray and brown. Like, give me color and horror at the same time. Like, I want horror to punch me in the face.
Yeah, every day and twice on Sunday. And I want to add something real quick here. Something I think that is one of the coolest things about Mörk Borg. They really do encourage you to write material for it. Like, if you go to their website, if you go to mörkborg.com, spelled MORKBORG.com, we're pronouncing it correctly, but it's spelled with an O. If you go to their website, they have right on the top third-party licensing. They encourage you to write for this game. They want more content. And I think that is really something that adds to the specialness of Mörk Borg, is that they really do want people who love it to write more adventures for it. And they lay it out for you how to do it. Publish it for free or sell it without us taking a cut. Adventures, hacks, modules, anything goes. Here are the rules to do it. Like, I highly recommend, if you are a person who's writing games or writing modules, you know, you could write a module for the world's most famous fantasy role-playing game, or you could write something for Mörk Borg. Maybe have a little more fun with it. Maybe get out there and get weird and get exciting with it, and know that this is a group of people who really want your skulls. They really need your skulls. So, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on Mörk Borg?
Yes, I do. I think you should check it out. I think that it is one of the most interesting games to have come out in the last 5-10 years, and you should treat yourself to it. Partly because it's awesome, mostly because I want you to tell me what kind of screaming demon you turned into at the end of the game.
I love it. And I also love Mörk Borg, and I also love that you've been listening to us rant and rave about games for another year. So thank you all so much for sharing your time with the Vintage RPG Podcast. This was another great episode, and we love making them for you. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at VintageRPG, posting about role-playing games like Mörk Borg and others every day of the week, every day. It's a lot of hard work.
It is a lot of work.
Boy, I wish somebody would kick in a little bit so that it was, you know, a little more worthwhile. You know, we have a Patreon, folks. Rattle that tin cup. It's the holidays.
Well, as Stu rattles that tin cup, I will tell you we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We have early release episodes. We've got behind-the-scenes looks at Stu's book and my RPG, as well as a killer Discord community that we'd love for you all to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. You can find Stu on the Instagram at vintagerpg. You could find me on the Twitter at Handbreaker, on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. It's mostly just board games, cute animals, and Dungeons and Dragons, and some behind-the-scenes stuff into my podcasting life and my day-to-day life, which is mostly still me hanging around my apartment. So check that out online. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And finally, I just want to say thanks again. We really love that you love the Vintage RPG podcast. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.